share my screen now. Is everything working all right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm Théo Zimmermann. I'm a postdoc at INRIA Paris and also a member of the development team of the Cockproof Assistant. I'm going to present to you a very preliminary look at an emerging model of community organization for package maintenance. So we all know that code reuse is a very important practice to increase productivity, the performance of software, and to get fewer bugs. Nowadays, the way this is done is generally to share pieces of software as packages through the internet, and package managers are used to install these reusable components. And we call software ecosystem, and in particular open source software ecosystems, these sets of software packages and their authors and maintainers. So here you have a timeline showing the creation date of many such package managers, and we can see that there are a lot of language-specific package managers, and especially in the last 10 to 15 years, there was many that were created. So package managers have successfully managed to lower significantly the barrier of entry to creating and sharing a new software library, and also to installing and using external dependencies. The consequence is that, of course, developers share more. So they create small libraries for their own needs, and they can share it quite easily. And also that developers add a lot more external dependencies to their projects. But an open source package is provided without any warranty, and there is a health threat, which is that a highly depended upon package that has a single maintainer, well, if this maintainer drops out, disappears completely or stops maintaining the package, then all the projects that depend on it will be at risk. So in the associated paper, I did a small analysis to estimate the proportion of packages that depend on the proportion of packages that are depended upon by several other and have just a single maintainer, and the numbers were surprisingly high. And being on GitHub and receiving contributions such as issues and pull requests doesn't really prevent against this if there is only one person that has access to the repository and who is only one person able to upload a new release. So fortunately, as long as the package has been published under an open source license, then you always have a solution, which is basically the right to fork. But there are many practical issues associated with forking, which I'm going to detail next. So you have forks. The status of forks can be unclear, especially on GitHub. You have a discoverability problem. There can be a significant cost of switching for the community, of switching to the fork. And it's not necessarily clear what trusts to put in the fork, and especially whether the fork will be more sustainable than the original project. So the traditional definition of a fork is what today we would call a hard fork. So generally it includes the idea of like a real divergence, so it's, with a new project name and a disjoint developer community. But since the advance of distributed version control and GitHub in particular, forks can actually be created simply to contribute to the upstream project, and this is what we call development forks. So the two are not to be confused, but in some cases it might be difficult to distinguish them. And actually, even before GitHub and distributed version control, some authors noticed that on SourceForge, there were many temporary forks which were there only to contribute upstream. And there was also this practice of forking a project because it seemed abandoned. In that case, this is still a hard fork, but the original project is not maintained anymore. So it's not like there is a real divergence between two projects that evolve separately. And so I'll qualify this kind of forks as friendly forks to distinguish them from hostile hard forks. So when looking at a fork, especially on GitHub, it might not be immediately obvious which type of fork it is, unless the author of the fork has made some efforts to put this information in the README, for instance, which will generally not be the case for development forks. In addition to this, there is a discoverability issue. Development platforms and package managers especially do not propose any mechanism to discover actively maintained forks of unmaintained libraries. On GitHub, you can access the list of forks, but this is something that is quite hard to browse and can even be incomplete. For instance, a popular project called Dagger was initially developed under the Square organization, but the new version is now, so it's now unmaintained, and the new maintained version is now under the Google organization. And if you go to the list of forks of Square/Dagger, then you see this warning that because the network of forks is too big, not all forks are shown. And in particular, the most important one, Google/Dagger, is not in the list. So yeah, I should add that there exists a browser extension called Lovely Forks that allows one to discover more easily actively maintained forks of GitHub projects, but this is not something that most people have installed. So for most people, this is going to be difficult. In addition, there is a cost of switching to a fork, which really depends on the ecosystem and the package manager. Some package manager support quite well the fact the installing from a development branch, and in that case, it can be quite easy to switch to a fork. If people who are maintaining the fork wants to produce new releases, depending on the ecosystem, they might need to change the name of the project, or at least to publish it under a different scope. And so overall, the cumulative efforts that the user community needs to do to switch to the fork might be important, especially if it's not clear for these users why the new fork should be trusted and whether it will be more sustainable in the long term. So all of this leads to some problems like duplication of effort during a period after a library stops being maintained. People might discover again and again the same issues, even though in fact there is like an open pull request with a fix to this issue, but the pull request has never been merged. And people might notice that the project isn't maintained and start migrating towards other libraries. And the longer it lasts, the more it reduces the chances of success of a new fork. So to alleviate this problem, I'm now going to describe a model of community organizations that I've observed in several ecosystems, and that helps creating this kind of forks and making them more sustainable in the long term. So the idea is to have a common place in a given ecosystem to host these library forks. So instead of a single individual taking responsibility of forking alone, they can propose to create a fork of an important but unmaintained library under this shared organization. And the main advantage of this is that it's not such a big commitment, because if you are a volunteer to maintain this library, but just like for the next 6 months or a year, well, you can still propose to fork the library in the organization. And if later on you have to stop doing this task, or you are no longer interested, then the organization administrators can transfer the maintenance over to a new volunteer if there is such a volunteer. So packages should still get a principal maintainer to avoid diluting responsibility, even if the maintenance effort can be collaborative. And the fact that such an organization has been created has several other consequences. In particular, the forks that it hosts will be more trustworthy, in particular with respect to their long-term sustainability. So, so it should help the community adopting the new fork more quickly. And also it provides an exit strategy for authors of a library, which has people depending on it, but who do not want to maintain it anymore. They can propose to transfer it to the community if there is a volunteer to take over. So here are some examples of some instances of this model of organization. So you can see that the oldest that I know about dates from 2014, and the number of repositories that this organization hosts varies between like a dozen and a few hundreds. And the number of members is the count for public members, because this is what GitHub shows. But in fact, this is another approximation, and there might be more members that did not make their status public, their membership public. So in addition to these organizations that I listed, there are other organizations with similar objectives that exist, but where there is no explicit process for hard forking. So only there is this long-term maintenance objective, and people can transfer a repository, but they don't really have any process for forking when the maintainer is completely unresponsive. So you can see the paper for to get more details on how I managed to find this list of organizations. But one of the filters that I use in particular to have a list of organizations that wouldn't be too long to browse was to look for organizations which had repositories that were transferred. And since this is not something that the GitHub API, this is not an information that the GitHub API provides, I looked for organizations that contained repositories whose creation date predates the creation date of the organization, which makes sense only if the repository was transferred. So now I'm going to focus on a specific instance, which is the Elm community organization. So this was founded in November 2015, and I interviewed its founder in July 2019. And according to its founder, the goal of the objective of creating this organization was first to lower the cost of forking, and in particular, there was a specific like package that was not compatible anymore with the latest version of the Elm language, and a pull request had been opened for about 2 months, and which contains the fix that was needed to make it work, and the pull request had not been merged, and so nobody could rely on this package anymore with the new version of the language. And so anyone could have forked the package and published it as their own. But because this particular package contains some JavaScript code in addition to Elm code, this kind of package had to go through a formal blessing process to get published in the package registry. And so this was some additional effort that the author of the fork needed to take. And so this was dissuasive. And the idea of doing the fork in a shared organization, which would mean that even if ones that the people that update it for the new version are not the ones that will continue maintaining it, helped moving forward. And so the other objective was to foster more like informal collaboration between community members. So the founder of the organization created from the start a meta repository, which was called Manifesto, whose README describes the objectives of the organization and whose issue tracker is used for a discussion of meta issues of the organization and discussion of integration of new packages. In addition, it has hosted some projects that made sense to develop collaboratively, like standard library extensions. And this idea of principal maintainers that I already talked about was not introduced from the start, but only 6 months later when someone proposed it. So I'm going to do a short comparison with a few other models that share some similarities. So in particular, Peer was the first PHP package manager before Composer, that is the one that is most used today. And it provided a central registry, but each package that was distributed here had also a repository and a bug tracker, which might have been convenient in this time before the advance of GitHub, before it existed. And in addition, there was this process for transferring responsibility of an unmaintained package to a new volunteer. But the main difference with the model of organization as I presented was that package authors didn't have any choice in joining this, joining Peer and accepting this process. As long as they wanted their package to be distributed, there was once a single registry to distribute PHP package, so they had to go through this. And sometimes they didn't really adhere to these ideas, and in the end, Peer is not really active anymore nowadays. Another comparison point is the Apache Software Foundation. It was originally founded around the Apache web server, which was a community fork of an unmaintained project. But nowadays, the new projects that join the foundation needs already to be actively maintained and have several maintainers. So even if this foundation might help them consolidate their long-term sustainability, it's not really suited for single maintainer packages, nor for hosting hard forks of already unmaintained projects. So to conclude, in this presentation, I identified an emerging model of community organization, which I've only started to study. And in addition, as a practitioner, I founded an instance of this model of organization in the Coq ecosystem, which is called Coq Community, and which was mainly inspired by Elm Community. And as a researcher, the future work that I want to do about this would be to manage to find a more exhaustive list of the organizations following this model, to find out which are the characteristics that these organizations share, which characteristics are more common, and which ones are associated with success, because not all of the instances of this model are necessarily as successful. And finally, what is the impact of this organization on their ecosystems?
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. So thank you very much, Théo. We're gonna do the clapping after the questions. So we already have some questions here in Slack. Alexander, I think you have one, so you can please go ask him.
So thank you very much, Théo. I really like your talk, and I also really like the fact that you combined the research perspective with the practitioner perspective and created this community. But going beyond your own community, how would you nudge other communities to adopt this model?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think that at the moment, I don't have enough data to prove to like community members of other ecosystems that do not have such an instance that this would be definitely useful for them. So the first thing I want to do is to well, I have anecdotal evidence. So for instance, I have my practitioner experience of the COP community where which has taken very fast. So the organization is just less than 2 years old, or actually just 2 years old now, and already has like many repository and many people involved, but like 40 repositories already. But this doesn't really. I don't think it's really sufficient to conclude that yeah, it has been really impactful and it's really important for ecosystems to have this. So first, I want to have more evidence, and um, then this is where your question is, and uh, I think I would go to like prominent members of the ecosystem, like people that are already well known, and talk to them about this model. And some of the organizations that I identified, like Vox Populi and Souchef, already did like some advocacy by writing blog posts, participating to interviews in podcasts, etc. So I think I would use that material to advocate for this model.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. Let's go. Raula has a question here. And if you have time, we can go for Dario's comment. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to make it very simple, but really nice work. I'm really interested because I think different ecosystems have different, like for example, NPM is user contributed and you can see the benefits, but you can also see the drawbacks with security.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so I'm wondering, like, for example, if a new maintainer takes over an old project, what is the reasons that they would take over? And then also what would be their responsibilities? So yeah, just if you have some ideas about this and how would you take over, or what is the incentive for someone to maintain? Is it because of usage, or is it because?
I think the main incentive is usage. Basically, you sometimes have very nice libraries, sometimes which really makes the ecosystem advance forward, and then suddenly the maintainer isn't available anymore, and this is really a shame, and it blocks everyone. So if you have some people volunteering to help with this because they are also interested in using this library, then this is the thing that is going to be most successful, I think. And sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say very quickly was that I think the R package or the R ecosystem, I don't know if they still do that, is that they take out any project that's not maintained. So this is also a problem.
Yeah. So our ecosystem is a bit peculiar because of this rolling release of they release both the R software and the packages at the same time. And indeed, they do take out the packages that are not maintained anymore. And in fact, these early package registry do have some sort of process for like unmaintained packages. You can like say once a package is unmaintained for a while, you can say, "Hey, I'm a volunteer," and if nobody reacts for a while, then you can be made a volunteer. So this is also similar here.
Yeah.
Except that you might maybe the repository for the package was hosted like on GitHub. It happens for many R packages, and then you don't have really access to the. You can't really go and close the issues, etc. So you have to do a fork, and so it doesn't go as far. But to finish answering your first question, there is, regarding the responsibility, you have like two things, two cases. This can be a package that just needs small updates to be compatible with the latest version of the language. In that case, the responsibility can be really lightweight. And you have a second case, which is like a package which was really under development, which was at the 0.x version, and in which case it really made sense to be at this 0.x version. And in that case, so the maintainer taking over can sometimes do like a very significant effort. And I have an example of a package where this was really important to many people, but there was a real need for a lot more effort to be put in, and it took like a year before someone actually did it. But in the end, it happened, and it was really useful for everyone.
Yeah, just one very quick comment maybe. I think there was in the news recently that one of the OSS maintainer went to prison or got some charges. So they were worried who's going to take over his project, or sentenced. So there was something in the news. So I think you can also check that up. And
yeah, I didn't hear about that.
Right. So yeah, excellent work. Excited. So yeah, it's nice work.